Pine and frost clung to the rafters of Highfell's great hall, but what prickled my skin was the press of power. Alphas gathered for the winter choosing, their scents sharpening the air like knives. I kept to the shadow of a pillar, willing my heartbeat quiet. The other omegas stood arranged like ornaments, braided hair, jeweled collars, practiced softness. I wore a plain wool dress and a stubborn stare. Shoulders back, Holofen girl, the steward hissed, pinching my sleeve. The Alpha King will pass any moment. Holofen. They never used my name. Lyra meant bracken music, in our marshland tongue, but to court folk I was simply Omega, tribute, currency. 3 nights earlier the elders had come to my door with the same bargain they'd offered every poor household in lean years: protection taxes forgiven, if someone of gentle temperament stood for the king's right. They had chosen me because I was alone, because I saw what others pretended not to see. The oaken doors boomed. Conversation thinned to a thread. He entered between banners, the Alpha King, Kale Draven, called wolf-crowned. No ceremonial glitter tonight, only a dark mantle at his shoulders and old scars mapped across his hands. He moved like a storm that had learned to walk on 2 legs. He didn't stop for nobles or their rehearsed smiles. His gaze swept the line of omegas the way a river reads its banks for depth. When those iron-gray eyes found mine, the room changed temperature. A pause, a breath, a verdict. Her. The steward's fingers became talons on my arm. Heads turned. Someone whispered, "She's the marsh one," like a spell to ward off ill luck. I kept my chin high because fear is blood in the water to alphas and kings. Kale's guard captain stepped forward. By the king's word. By the king's word, I was separated from satin and jewels, from pitying looks and hungry ones. By the king's word, the corridor swallowed us. Stone, torch, tapestry, the long anatomy of a fortress built to outlast storms and rebellions. I counted doors to keep panic from chewing my thoughts. Past the wolf totems, past the moon-etched lintel, we stopped at a chamber bound with ironwork in the shape of running wolves. The captain knocked once and withdrew. "Enter," said a voice like low thunder. Heat hit me, hearth roar, lamp glow, the musk of leather and clean steel. Furs lay like fallen snow across a bed the size of a raft. Maps crowded one wall, knives another. The Alpha King stood by a table set for 2, mantle shed, shirt unlaced at the throat. He looked younger without the crown, but no gentler. "You were not prepared," he said, studying my plain dress, my unbraided hair. "Which village sent you, Omega?" "Holofen," I answered. "We had no notice." His mouth slanted, something not quite humor. "Notice is a court luxury." He poured dark wine into 2 cups, did not offer one. "What do they call you when they remember you have a name?" "Lyra. Lyra," he repeated, as if testing a blade's balance. "Do you know why you're here?" "Because a council owed coin," I said. "Because I'm easy to send." "Because," he said quietly, "the marsh elders wrote that you are strange. You dream awake, you speak to currents no one else can feel. They hoped I would be insulted. I am not." The room seemed to lean. I touched the small bone charm at my throat, marsh work shaped like a crescent reed. "If you mean I sense what runs beneath things, that is Holofen inheritance, not sickness." "Good," Kale said. "I prefer truth to superstition." He held my gaze. "I have a proposition, Lyra of Holofen. Endure one night at my side, my bed, yes, but with no binding marks and no claim. See dawn here, and I will send you home free, with royal protection sealed over your marsh. Refuse, and you leave at once, protection void. Decide." The choice was a trap set openly on the floor between us. But in the marsh we learned to read what water would do before we stepped. I read the rivulets of fate singing off this man, king, alpha, predator, yes, and something else threaded through him like moonlight through reeds. "One night," I said, voice steady. "No bite, no binding. You swear by your crown." "I swear by my crown," Kale Draven said, and the wolves hammered in iron above the door seemed to listen. He motioned to the food. "Eat. Fear drinks hunger dry, And I won't have you fainting because some court tutor taught you to starve for an alpha's eye. I ate because his logic was sound and because Holofen girls do not look away from hard truths. When I finished, he slid a folded bundle across the table. Bath is through there. Wear this after, warm, simple. In the steamlit chamber I undid the marsh laces from my dress with clumsy fingers. The tub was copper, the water pine-scented and perfectly hot. I sank until my ears filled and the world softened. I thought of eel traps and fog horns in my grandmother's voice. The river carries everything eventually, even fear. I dressed in a blue robe, soft as dusk. When I returned, Cale had shed his mantle and boots. He was taller without pomp, all sinew and old battles, not marble but weathered oak. He didn't touch me. That surprised me more than any threat would have. He simply said, "Tell me what the currents say when you listen." I chose honesty, the kind that can't be used against you because you've already made peace with it. Under doors and skin and law, there are threads. Some tug. Some snarl. Sometimes I hear the knot before it tightens. Threads, he said, as if it were a word he'd been trying to remember. There is a knot around my line, my house. I've felt it since autumn. I closed my eyes and let the room's small sounds become river, the hiss of hearth pitch, the scrape of wool on his sleeve, the far thud of a gate's heartbeat. Threads brightened. There, the knot, like a fishhook buried under callus. You're not wrong, I murmured. Something hidden, coiled in your court. Names? Not tonight, I said. Not cleanly. But the pull is there. He nodded once, as if this agreed with other signs he'd catalogued alone. Then the marsh sent me the right omega. The marsh did not send me, I said. They wanted me gone. Then we agree the marsh was wrong. His mouth eased the smallest fraction. You will take the bed. I will drowse beside you like a wolf near a fire. If the instincts that make poets stupid say we are fated, I will still keep my word. Instincts that make poets stupid, I echoed, earning a quiet huff of laughter. He banked the fire, left only amber coals, then drew back the furs. I felt the old panic claw my ribs, small room, large man, legends with teeth. But he lay on his back, one forearm over his eyes, as if daring himself not to look. You're trembling, he said into the dim. Yes. Of me? Of losing me, I said before pride could censor truth. I have been alone long enough to be fluent in it. Silence settled. Then softly, Lyra, this will not be a night I take. It will be a night we survive together. Endure with me. We lay inches apart. His heat seeped through furs and robe like good whiskey through bone. The old stories say an alpha scent can bruise your will. This was not bruising. This was tide pulling at a shore already shaped to answer. I kept my breathing even, counted the beat in his throat, steadier than mine. The moon climbed. Time thinned. And somewhere between one breath and the next, fear untied a small knot inside me and let the river run. I woke to the softest weight, his hand over mine on the furs, not trapping, just there. Dawn had not yet rimmed the shutters. The room was a quiet animal listening to snow. You didn't sleep, Cale said without lifting his arm from his eyes. I watched the fire argue with itself. And judged me. I listened, I corrected. The way I do to water. He lowered his arm. In the half-light his face had shed the iron mask of rule and kept only the lines earned honestly, grief, choices, winter. What did you hear? That you meant your vow. I always mean my vows. A pause. Even when I wish I didn't. You wish you didn't tonight? I wish you had come to court with braids and obedience, he said, and for the first time his smile reached his eyes. It would make me less curious. Curiosity is how marsh folk die, I said. Step on the wrong shimmer and you're in the sinkhole. And yet you still listen. Listening is the rope. The hour before dawn is when truths come easier, or perhaps we are too tired to polish them. He told me of a winter 3 years back when the river froze wrong and wolves could run the moat, of a cousin who smiled too readily, of a law called the threefold mercy his mother had tried to pass, No possession without consent, no bite without vow, no mating without a choice spoken twice. His mother died before it could be sealed. The court called it softness, he said. I called it balance. Neither word won. Then why offer me a night that sounds like the laws you lost? Because I am king, he said simply. And I can keep small mercies even when the court spits them out. He rose, stoked the fire. The light painted his scars the color of ash. He was beautiful the way a coastline is beautiful, not smooth, but truth by weather. Dress, he said. There's something I want you to see before the sun chooses a side. We wrapped ourselves in winter wool and followed a spiral stair whose stones remembered thousands of feet and one secret. At the top, a round chamber held only shelves, a ledger desk, and a glass bowl the size of a barrel hoop, clear as frozen river. The lunar glass, Cale said. Made in the first rain by an Omega artisan and an Alpha smith. It shows currents when two true hands touch it. True as in mated? True as in not lying. The corner of his mouth twitched. To themselves. I stepped closer. Beneath the surface, light swam like fish in moon water. I lifted my palm, paused. If nothing answers? Then you go home with my seal, and I stop telling myself old songs can be made new. And if something answers? Then we let the rope of it pull us only as fast as we choose, he said. Courtship, not claim. Choice spoken twice. Consent is a marsh word. You do not step where you have not learned the depth. I set my palm to the lunar glass. He did the same opposite me. The bowl breathed cold. The room held its breath. Light gathered under our hands and threaded itself into a shape I knew from hollow fen gullies at spring flood, a knot loosening. The lunar glass did not erupt, it wove. Silver strands unspooled from our palms, crossed, tested tension like weavers at the first pass of a loom. Scenes rose, not visions stamped in prophecy, but possibilities as shy as otter wake, a council hall with its windows thrown open to marsh air, my hands on a boy's brow as fever broke while the court watched an Omega lead, Cale and I back to back in a room thick with lying perfume, our eyes laughing at the same private joke. I pulled away first. The light relaxed into ordinary clarity, no longer a river, just water. I had to steady myself on the rim. Well? Cale asked softly. I saw a ways through, I said, surprised at my own voice. Not a collar. A compass. Then we speak choice twice, he said, as if the words had been waiting by the door. Not today. Not until you have stood again in hollow fen and decided whether the sound of reeds still means home. Take a fortnight. I will send you with 10 guard and a seal. Your marsh will be safe whether you return or not. Kings make promises like cliff edges make wind, I thought, something old, something that will exist long after you, something to lean into carefully. But the current under this promise felt clean. You do this and your court will talk treason in polite voices, I said. They already do. And you will still keep the threefold mercy as if it were law. I will keep it because I can. We descended to the rooms where our night had begun. Snow had started its soft quarrel with the sill. He poured tea this time, not wine. For travel, he said. For thawing. King, I said before I could smooth the syllables. Cale, if I return, I will not be a quiet queen. He looked almost offended. Quiet queens are loud failures. I laughed, startled by how easily it came. Then hear my half of the vow you haven't asked for. If I return, I will be your rope. When the river runs too fast, I will help you read it. When the court wears masks, I will name the eyes behind them. When the old songs hurt instead of heal, I will sing new ones. And I will be your bank, he said, standing. When the current tries to take you whole, I will give it shape. When hunger speaks with other people's mouths, I will feed it until it quiets. When anyone says Omega as if it means lesser, I will make them learn another meaning. We did not kiss. It would have been easy to mistake river for ocean and drown. Instead, he took my hand and pressed it once, a formal seal the marsh would respect. Go and choose, he said. Return only because you want to. I will. The word surprised me again, not because it was promise, but because it was the kind of promise you can keep, a decision made aloud to your own bones first. Holofen did not applaud my return. Marsh towns rarely applaud anything but rain at the right moment. The elders sat in their reed chairs under the eave of the longhouse, stone-faced, as Cale's guards posted the royal seal on the gate, under the wolf crown's protection. Trespassers will be fed to the river or the law, whichever arrives first. Back then, Elder Sarn said, as if I'd been to market and found a poor price. Did he send you with child? Marsh words cut in straight lines. He sent me with winter bread for the poor stoops and iron nails for the west pier. I said and held out the ledger. And with no claim on my neck. The children stared at the guards' cloaks, then at me, then at the paper with its slash of the king's hand. They would remember the seal longer than any kisses a story might invent for later. I moved into my narrow house at the edge of the reeds. I lit the oil lamp with the flint my grandmother used. I slept in my own bed and woke to the honest stink of silt. For 3 days I walked the paths my feet knew better than my tongue. Crab traps, winter herbs, the place where the river pretends to be shallow and isn't. The currents did not change because a king had looked at me. The poor were still cold, the elders still careful, the young still trying on bravery. But the threads around the village loosened, someone else's fear no longer choking our air. On the 4th day I found Elder Sarn waiting on my step, hat in his hands. You carry the king's curiosity, he said without greeting. You always carried it, girl. Now it has a face. He kept his word, I said. He did. Which is new, and the kind of new that makes men with old rules polish their knives. If you go back, you will be a bridge. Bridges are walked on and walked across and sometimes burned. Then I will be a braided bridge, I said, lifting my chin. 3 ropes 4. Harder to cut. Sarn snorted, half pleased, half worried. Holy Marsh. Your grandmother would have spat and said the same. He hesitated. We did not send you out of kindness, Lyra. We sent you because we had no kindness left to spend. If you go back, take ours with you now. We owe you that. He pressed a packet into my palm, salted fish, pennywort, a small carved heron. Marsh blessings. I put them on my mantle beside the eel flint and felt the house exhale. That night the water spoke in my bones like it had when I was small and feverish. Go. Not because of the man, though the man's face rose behind my eyes, but because the knot I had felt under high fell was cinching. Currents ask us to choose in the same breath that they ask us to hurry. I do not like being hurried. I also know when it saves lives. At dawn I told the guards to ready the skiff. Back to the king? One asked. Back to the knot, I said. And to the only knife large enough to cut it. Highfell met us with banners snapped thin by wind and a rumor that tasted like copper. The king's steward had been found with a secret key and a map to the postern gate. Not dead. Not yet. Cale held him alive for answers, and the court called that cruel, because it was tidier than calling treason by its name. Cale met me in the outer court, no crown, snow in his hair like ash on a blacksmith's sleeve. You came back, he said, not a question, more like a knot loosening one tooth. I spoke my choice once in Holofen, I said. Here is twice. Something in his face changed shape, not alpha hunger, not victory, relief, old as winter's end. He lifted my hand toward his mouth, then remembered the rope we had laid between vows and lowered it, thumb pressing the inside of my wrist where the rivers beat lives. We have less time than courtesy requires, he said, voice low. The court smells blood and wants theater. The steward will talk or will die for refusing, and either way someone will call me tyrant. I would rather be called surgeon. Will you sit with me while I cut? Bring me his ledger, I said. And the key? We did not take the man to dungeons. Cale chose a cold room with honest light. The steward, Evan, sweated into his laces and tried to wrap himself in his father's name. I let Cale's guards stand like doorframes and set my fingers on the ledger's spine. Threads open like reeds when the wind remembers a song. He is not your knot, I told Cale quietly. He is a loop in it. Pull him and we tighten the noose. Cale's mouth was grim, but his eyes warmed a fraction, the look a soldier gives a map that finally shows elevations. Who then? The one who taught him to keep his hands clean, I said, still reading the ink's nervous tremor. Someone who has not yet whined about the cold this winter, because he spends it near other people's fires. That narrows it to 40, Cale muttered. Court is a study in not whining with your mouth. Then we listen to other mouths, I said, and turned to Evan. Tell me what you fear if you speak. My children, he sobbed, and the thread in the air twanged, true as any plucked wire. Cale looked at me. I nodded. He's not lying. Then hear mercy once, Cale said to Evan, voice iron. Speak, and I will put your children under the same seal I gave Holofen. Lie, and the river gets your body back in pieces. Evan spoke. Names, routes, times. Not the mastermind, but the pattern. It ran always near the kitchens, near the warming rooms, near doors kept open to draw out wax smoke, near servants whose faces court forgets to see. Cale dismissed the guards to their tasks. When the room had only our breath inside it, he looked at me the way he had before the lunar glass, like the river had just risen and we still had time to lift the boats. Twice chosen, he murmured. Once by me, once by yourself. Now choose me back, I said, in front of them. They will chew your bones. I am Marsh, I said. I have more bones than they have teeth. He laughed, rough and quiet, and I loved him then, there, before vows, before the court, in the simple way a current meets another and discovers they are one river, though I did not say the word aloud. In its place I offered the thing my people call a Rio promise. I set my palm over his heart. Alpha, I said, letting the title hold all it could. King. Cale. Partner. Omega, he answered, as if the word itself had been waiting for a new definition. Queen. Lyra. Partner. We turned toward the hall together, toward knives with embroidery on their hilts, toward a third mercy spoken into law by two voices, not one, toward the work of a lifetime measured not by collars, but by ropes we would learn to tie and untie until the kingdom held. The great hall woke like a beast prodded with spears. Courtiers rustled, wolves stitched in gold where courage should be. Cale took the dais without a crown. Nothing unsettles nobles like a king who doesn't need metal. I stood one step left of him, the place for a war captain or a promised mate. Murmurs braided, Omega, Marsh girl, trouble. Cale lifted a hand, sound obeyed. There has been trespass against crown and commons, he said. Its path runs through our own walls. I will name it and unmake it. The steward Evan was brought forward, wrists unbound. Gasps. Mercy confuses those who expect spectacle. I promised his children shelter for truth, Cale said. He spoke. The rot did not start in him. He pointed past lords to the service door yawning like a second mouth. The knot runs there, through hands you step around without seeing. I let the currents hum. If a lord pays coin and a cook opens a gate, both purchase the treason, I said. One with silver, one with trust. A baron in green snorted. We are to take counsel from an unclaimed Omega? He had practiced the insult the way boys practice sword forms. Cale didn't shout. We will take counsel, he said, from the only person here who can hear what our pride drowns. He nodded to the herald. Routes, hours, initials spilled from a seized ledger. I watched faces for stillness. Prey freezes when brush moves. There, a lord whose rings shone too clean, scrubbed of smoke. There, his lady staring at the jam as if it might confess. When the reading ended, Cale said, By wolves and folk's law, treasoners will be tried. By the mercy you refused me in council, no cellars without witness, and no blades without verdict in daylight. The service door swung wide. A cook in flour black walked out with a tray of bread. He set it at my feet and knelt. For the Omega who saw us, he said, voice like millstone, forgive our blindness before our crimes. One servant knelt, then 10, then many. Nobles stiffened like hedges in frost. The hall changed weather in a single breath. Kneel no longer, Kale told the servants. You owe me no worship for seeing what you live. Only truth. To the captain. Seal the postern. Search the warming rooms. No blades drawn unless drawn at you. The search moved like surgery, swift, clean, aimed at illness, not body. I tore a heel of the bread and ate where I stood. Let the court see an Omega feed herself without permission. A scullery boy slipped near, apology in every step. My lady, the key lady said not to tell, but telling feels like the only thing that stops the worst. The key lady? Lisa of the laundries. She keeps a ring on a chain. Says they're for coal stores, but they're too fine for soot. Threads tugged east. Laundries, then a narrow corridor to the cracked tower. Cracked, not broken. Captain, I called. With me. Kale arrived first. With me. He corrected gently, falling in beside me as if service passages were a hunting path. Kings are not meant to crawl, alphas aren't meant to smell of soap and starch. We did both. We found Lisa in a room pretending to be about linens and truly about exits. Hooks, ropes, a chalk map of ducks. She went very still. Majesty. Omega. Keys, I said. You first, she answered, hand diving into a bin. No knife, a vial. She dashed it at the hearth. Flame hissed blue, smoke rolled, sweet and wrong. Kale was already between me and the fire, hauling a wet sheet over the blaze with the speed of a boy who grew up putting out bad things. Lisa bolted for the tower door. I didn't see her feet, I felt the pull. Left. I shouted. She cut right into the captain's arms. Bottle spilled, resin, lamp black, beachar. Sabotage meant to be called accident, smoke, panic, trample, blame, chaos. Kale flexed a hand, skin blistered where steam had kissed him. He noticed my glance and managed a wry half-smile. Threefold mercy, he said, as if reminding himself. Daylight trial. No cellar blades. They marched Lisa into the hall with wrists bound in cloth, not iron. Daylight made her smaller than the authority she wore in steam. When Kale asked for names, she sneered, the bravado of someone who has already traded truth for rescue. I spoke to no lord, she said. Only to Coin. Coin wears many faces. Name the faces you saw, I said. Ringed or soot black. She studied me. You think Omega and King makes a law, marsh girl? She spat on the flags. The room waited for teeth. Kale answered with procedure. The law is the law. You will meet it. Hear this. If those who paid you leave you to hang alone, I will find them and salt their cowardice. Loneliness shook her more than threat. Her eyes slid to the servants, steammates, wintermates. None stepped forward, none looked away. Truth is a clean cut, it bleeds before it heals. Fine, she said. A name. Lord Harrow. The Baron in green went corpse white. 2 guards' hands reminded him that gravity loves the rich, too. Who else? A priest who blesses both tables. She flicked a glance to the gallery. And a lady with a ring of stags who thinks men are chess. Kale's eyes touched mine. Later I signaled. Names shouted breed bad exorcisms. You will have warmth and food, Kale told Lisa. You will be heard by wolves and folk, not only me. Wolves are folk, she muttered. Lower to me. Mind your step. These stones remember queens who thought law would dull teeth. They remember those who let law be theater, I said. When the doors shut behind the procession, the hall burst into opinions. Kale lifted a hand, Noise knelt. He looked not at lords but at servants. This is the first day. If you are harmed for speaking, I will know. If you are bribed to be silent, I will learn the coin's mint. Then, in front of them all, he took my uninjured hand with his burned one. Not a claim, not a collar, an answer. The hall began to redraw its picture of power. By nightfall, rumors had legs. I had hexed the lunar glass. The Alpha King had lost his bite to an Omega's mouth. Soon wolves would wear ribbons. We let them run until they tired. Then we worked. Cale's palm blistered clean. I bound pennywort and honey under linen. A king shouldn't let an omega dress him, the chamberlain muttered. Cale raised an eyebrow. The doorway remembered errands elsewhere. Will the court bend? I asked. They will feign a bow and plot from the kneel, he said. It buys time. He flexed, winced, grinned. You heal like a marsh, efficient, unfussy. Say thank you like a king. Thank you, he said. The hearth burned warmer for it. We mapped the knot. Harrow, a two-table priest, the staggering lady, the roster at the postern, wax makers with extra tapers. Not brilliant, patient. Tomorrow we seat a mixed tribunal, Cale said. Wolves and folk. We breathed the threefold mercy where it was shelved. They called roof softness until the first rain, I said. He looked at me as if hunger and faith had braided. Whatever you choose, I'll keep the mercies. You were the rope. I won't burn it if you leave. I'm not leaving. I'm choosing. That is slower. He laughed, quiet. Then choose slower here. He offered his uninjured hand. I took it, the shape of partnership in rehearsal. We walked the ramparts. Snow sifted. Wolves patrolled below, gray backs easy with purpose. He spoke of his mother's law. I spoke of reed songs that keep children from sinkholes. Somewhere between, our steps learned one rhythm. At my door, he said, if the hall is a storm tomorrow, stand by my left, where you can reach me with your right if you fall. Exactly, he said, as if I had answered a question he didn't know he was asking. Before sleep, I set a reed bone charm over the map. The currents tugged faintly toward the east gate, then slackened, as if something had noticed me noticing. They're patient, I said. So we will be relentless. Cale nodded once, the way mountains nod to time. The tribunal met under windows cracked to the cold so breath bloomed and lies could be watched leaving mouths. 12 sat, wolves and folk, a seamstress, a baker, 2 minor lords, a merchant with inked fingers, the guard captain, others by lot. Cale chose the foot of the throne, not the seat. Pride had to climb down to speak. We began with mercy, spoken aloud. No possession without consent. No bite without vow. No mating without a choice spoken twice. The words rang like tools found after years of rust. Lisa told her part, keys traded under steam, doors left shy of latched, messages pinned into hems. She named Harrow once. His face tried outrage and landed on sweat. The priest confessed to prudence, coward's perfume for bribery. The staggering lady smiled and said, Alphas lead, Omegas breed. Kings should not ask bread to speak. The world you mean, the seamstress said, is a dress that splits when you walk. Laughter pricked the white smile flat. When I spoke, I did not conjure, I listened. Threads do not lie, I said. This knot is habit. People who think wealth is pardon and servants will carry their sins like trays. Harrow snapped. An unbound Omega plays at rule because a man shared his furs. I am Omega, I said. So I've survived rooms meant to smother me. I am listening to a kingdom tired of whispering. And I am not the only one. I gestured to the 12. Counting took longer than speeches. Daylight verdicts. Harrow, guilty. The priest, guilty. Lisa, guilty of lesser treason. Sentence commuted to rebuilding under guard. The staggering lady, stripped of titles and held under watch pending further proofs. No cheers. An exhale. Sometimes that is louder. Punishments were not whips and pits but labor, fines, loss of face, the kind that stings longer. Some protested softness, others saw the wisdom of wounds that teach. The proclamation went to every gate and market. Mercy was law today, not story. When the benches emptied, we stayed beneath the open windows, our breath honest in the cold. Cale rested his head to stone and closed his eyes. For a heartbeat he was a boy who had kept his mother's promise. We spoke mercy into a day, he said. We must speak it into a year, I answered. Law is a road, people forget to walk it unless there are lanterns. Be my lantern, he said. I will be the road. I thought of Holofen warnings that keep children from reed ditches, of Lisa's brittle smile cracking when loneliness answered it, of my hand in his while the hall redrew power. I have chosen you twice, I said, the lunar glass and the ramparts. Here is the third for me, though the law asks too. I choose you. Not for rescue. For work. He opened his eyes. Relief looked like pain. Then hear my second. I choose you, Lyra of Holofen, Omega, Moon Speaker, Trouble. Not for ornament. For work. Then we work, I said, and met him halfway. The kiss was not a claim. It was an agreement. We stood brow to brow. We bind when you wish, he murmured. Bite only when you ask? Crown only when you've whistled at the old one for luck. I whistle, I said. Loud. Then whistle, Queen. Outside, a wolf answered a bell with a low howl that was not mourning. The knot in Highfell had loosened, more weighted. Come, I said. Show me the city we promised to keep. I want to learn street names before they learn mine. He offered his arm, not a tether, a line we both held. We walked into winter that smelled of iron and bread and change. Windows watched and invented tales. Let them. We would write the one that lasted, Alpha and Omega, King and Queen. Married not by bite before law, but by choice kept each morning until the whole kingdom could hear itself without whispering. We walked past the smiths where sparks wrote brief stars, past bakers who pretended not to stare, past children practicing wolf howls between giggles. Each corner taught me a name. Each name laid claim to me back. I did not feel owned. I felt answered. The first thaw came early that year. Ice broke on the river like glass under a song, and with it came the merchants, wagons rolling through Highfell's gates with salt, cloth, and gossip. The story of the tribunal had spread beyond the castle walls. They called it the Day of Balance. Cale met me in the courtyard where the wolves were shedding their winter coats. Every traveler brings the same tale, he said, brushing fur from his sleeve. An Omega spoke and lived. A king listened and didn't fall. Stories grow like vines, I said. If we don't guide them, they strangle what they meant to praise. He smiled faintly. Then guide them, my queen. You hear the undercurrents. I hear only the noise. So I went to the markets, to the places where tongues wagged freer than banners. I listened to traders argue over the price of glass, to old women mutter about whether the moon now favored wolves or marshes. When they asked about the new law, I said nothing grand, just that mercy wasn't softness, it was strength that remembered what pain felt like. And that seemed to travel faster than decrees. At dusk I returned to the keep, to find Cale bent over maps of the northern borders. Raiders again? I asked. Scouts, likely. But it may be time to call the packs. Then take me with you. He looked up, startled. You would ride north into blood? I would see the land you bleed for, I said. How can I counsel balance if I know only halls and hearths? He hesitated. Then, softly, then you will ride beside me, not behind. The court will faint, and that alone will be worth it. I laughed. Let them faint. Perhaps they'll wake kinder. The northern marches were a different world, ironwood forests, mountains sharp enough to slice the sky. We rode with 20 wolves, their pelts thick, their eyes bright with hunger for movement. The air smelled of snow and freedom. I had never ridden so far from Holofen. My mare's breath plumed like incense in the dawn. Cale kept pace beside me, his expression softening whenever he looked my way. Here, without the weight of the throne, he seemed almost human, a man instead of a myth. At the ridge above Frost Vale, we stopped. Smoke rose from a distant valley. Scouts, he murmured. Or thieves warming themselves. I closed my eyes, feeling the threads under the wind. The current there was wrong, taut, humming with intent. Not thieves, I said. Something older. Something that remembers hate. Cale's jaw tightened. The ferals? I nodded. And more than one den. He turned to his captains. Prepare the wolves. We ride before nightfall. They moved to obey, but I touched his arm. Kale, if the ferals are truly what you think, blades won't be enough. You'll need the moon's favor. He frowned. You mean your visions? I mean the balance. Wolves hunt to protect, not to conquer. Make them remember that. He watched me for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. Then stand with me tonight. Let them hear your words before the hunt. The moon rose enormous and red over the camp, staining the snow like spilled wine. The wolves gathered around the fire, fur silvered in the light, eyes bright with curiosity and fear. I stepped forward, heart hammering. I am no alpha, I began, and no wolf. But I know what the moon says to those who still listen. The fire popped, a few heads lifted. It says that strength without mercy is just another kind of hunger. It says that killing to live is not the same as living to kill. Silence. Then a single hull broke it. Low, uncertain, joined by another and another, until the night filled with voices that trembled the air. When it faded, Kale's hand found mine, warm even through the chill. You remind them who they are, he said softly. And who are they? I asked. He smiled faintly. The reason this kingdom still stands. Later, as we prepared to rest before the march, he stood at the edge of the firelight, gaze lost to the stars. You've changed more in 3 moons than I did in 10 years on the throne, he said. Then perhaps the throne needed shaking. I teased. He laughed quietly. Stay near me tomorrow. If the ferals saw what I fear, they'll smell our bond before our blades. Let them smell it, I said. Maybe they'll remember the world they forgot. We reached Frostvale by dawn. The village was half ruin, snow-drifted roofs, doors torn from hinges. Tracks led into the forest, too many to count. Kale raised a hand, signaling silence. The wolves fanned out. A sound came from within the trees, low, guttural, almost human. Then figures emerged, half-shifted wolves, eyes yellow-white, bodies scarred by old rage. The ferals. Stay behind me, Kale murmured. I'll stand beside you, I corrected. He didn't argue. The ferals stopped a dozen paces away. Their leader, a female with matted gray fur, bared her teeth. Alpha King, she rasped, voice broken by too many winters. You claim what you cannot control. Kale's tone was calm, regal. I claim only the right to keep peace. Peace? She snarled. You built walls and called them laws. Her words struck too close to truth. I stepped forward before Kale could answer. Then break them with mercy, I said. Come back to the pack. The king offers amnesty for those who choose it. A murmur rippled through the ferals. Some lowered their heads, others bristled. The leader's eyes flicked to my pendant. Moon Speaker, she whispered. We thought your kind dead. Not dead, I said, voice steady. Only waiting to be heard. The forest held its breath. Then, slowly, the alpha female bowed her head. Then hear us, she said. We are tired of hate. By dusk, Frostvale's fires burned with food instead of fear. The ferals had laid down their claws and taken the king's mark of truce, a white stone etched with the moon and the wolf. Kale watched them with cautious relief. You've done what no army could, he said to me quietly. Turned a war into a conversation. I only spoke what they'd forgotten, I said. That the moon shines on all wolves, even the broken ones. He looked at me as if seeing something more than human. You realize, he said slowly, you've changed what it means to be Omega in this kingdom. Good, I replied. Then no one will mistake silence for obedience again. That night we camped under the thawing stars. Kale lay beside me on a blanket of wolf pelts. If my mother could see this, he murmured, she'd believe the old prophecies were real. Maybe they are, I said, tracing the scars on his hand. Maybe we're just the ones stubborn enough to live them. He turned toward me, his expression softening. Lyra of Holofen, he said quietly, when this piece is written, will you write it beside me, not as symbol, not as queen alone, but as half of what holds the balance? I smiled, the firelight catching the silver thread of my pendant. I already am. We returned to Highfell in spring. Flowers pushed through the frost, and the people greeted us not with bows, but with open palms, a new sign of respect born from what we built. The court tried to resume its old games, but something had shifted. Servants spoke more freely, alphas thought before barking orders, and even the nobles measured power differently. Kale and I ruled not from the throne, but from the long table in the sunlit hall, where wolves and villagers ate together. One morning, as I walked the balcony above the gardens, I felt a familiar pulse in the air, the lunar glass calling. Kale found me there, eyes knowing. It stirs again? Yes, I whispered. But this time it doesn't ask for proof. It asks for a promise. He took my hand. Then let's give it one. Together, we placed our palms on the crystal's surface. Light rose, not blinding but soft, like dawn through mist. Images flickered, fields healed, rivers clear, wolves and men building side by side. And beneath it all, a heartbeat steady and shared. Kale looked at me, wonder reflected in his gaze. Whatever this power is, he said, it doesn't belong to me. Or to me, I said. It belongs to us. To everyone who dares to listen. He smiled. Then let's make sure they do. And when we left the tower, the world outside seemed to hold its breath, not in fear, but in expectation. The kind that comes before a new age begins. The kingdom of Highfell changed slowly, like ice surrendering to the current. Change that survives must move through roots, not storms. The first decree of the new spring abolished the tribute system that had once sent omegas like me to the claiming halls. In its place, Kale signed the Charter of Balance, his hand on the quill, mine steadying it. Omegas are citizens, the charter read, not offerings. Alphas are guardians, not masters. And all hearts, wolf or not, are bound first by choice. When the decree was read aloud in the Capitol Square, the people were silent at first. Then a woman stepped forward, gray hair, tattered shawl, and lifted her granddaughter onto her shoulders. For the first time, she shouted, she will grow up without being sold. The cheer that followed rolled through the city like thunder finding joy. Later, in the quiet after celebration, Kale and I walked the ramparts. Do you think they'll still call me Alpha King? He asked. They will, I said. But now it will sound less like a warning and more like a promise. He turned toward me, eyes thoughtful. And what will they call you? The moon's answer, I teased. He smiled. Then we are storm and tide, balance and pull. But beneath his laughter, I sensed worry, threads drawn tight toward the south, where letters carried darker tidings. The southern lords, those who profited from tribute, would not yield easily. Let them come, Kale said, voice quiet but sure. They'll find this kingdom doesn't bow anymore. War, when it came, did not roar, it slithered. Caravans vanished. Border towns burned, not by accident but message. The southern banners rose, red sun on black. They called themselves the Sovereign Pax, loyal only to themselves. In the war tent, maps sprawled across the table like wounded hides. Kale's captains spoke in turns. Numbers, supply routes, losses. When they finished, Kale looked to me. The currents? I closed my eyes. The air trembled with threads, fear, blood, ambition, but also something unexpected, hesitation. They fight from pride, not hunger, I said. Break their pride, and they'll lay down arms. How? The captain growled. Pride bleeds last. Then bleed it without killing the man, I said. Show them the strength of mercy again. Kale nodded. We'll take back the south not with fire, but with sight. We marched at dawn. The wolves moved like shadows, and I rode beside Kale beneath the banner of the moon and wolf entwined. The southern army waited across the Vale of Ashes, 10,000 strong. Yet, when they saw the Alpha King at the front beside an Omega Queen, confusion rippled through their ranks. Kale raised his sword but spoke instead of striking. We do not come to chain you, he called, voice carrying across the wind. We come to remind you what freedom costs when you mistake cruelty for rule. A murmur spread. I stepped forward, holding the pendant that had once marked my shame. I was the offering they would have sent, I said. Now I am the proof that mercy does not weaken a kingdom, it saves it. The battle that followed was not of blood, but of courage. The first line of the sovereign packs faltered, wolves lowering their heads in confusion as ours refused to charge. Kale had ordered restraint, defense, not slaughter. When their alpha challenged him, Kale met him in the clearing between armies. No guards. No advantage. Only truth. I was raised to believe strength meant domination, Kale said. You still believe that? Strike me down, and you'll rule ashes. Stand with me, and you'll rule a home. The southern alpha hesitated. Then, slowly, he dropped his blade into the dirt. One by one, the others followed. It was over before it began. That night, the field filled with shared fires. Wolves from north and south mingled, uncertain but willing. I walked among them, hearing murmurs of disbelief that war could end without death. Kale joined me, cloak around his shoulders, exhaustion softening his features. You turned an army with words again, he said. I shook my head. You did. They only believed me because they saw you listening. He laughed quietly. Then I'll keep listening if it wins wars. Peace settled, but peace has its own weight. Highfell swelled with refugees, trade, and the slow rebuilding of trust. Kale convened the first United Council, a circle, not a throne. Alphas, betas, omegas, humans, wolves, marsh folk, mountain clans, all voices. The courtiers whispered chaos, but I saw order born from it. During one session, an old merchant stood. What stops this balance from dying when you two do? Kale looked to me. You tell him. Legacy isn't blood, I said. It's habit. We'll teach them to listen until it feels strange not to. The council voted to establish the Moon's Court, a tribunal of both wolves and men, bound to the Charter of Balance. It would outlive us. That night, I stood alone in the tower of the lunar glass. The crystal pulsed softly, as though breathing. We did it, I whispered. Or at least, we began it. Kale entered quietly behind me. You've been up here for hours. Listening, I said. The currents are quiet for once. He came beside me, his warmth easing the chill. Then maybe they're waiting to see what we do next. I turned to him. Then let's give them something worth remembering. Years passed, and the legends grew, of the Alpha King who bowed to no one except his queen, and the Omega who spoke the language of spirits and law-like. The children in the castle played among the wolf statues, pretending to be Kale and Lyra, balancing power and mercy. When the first gray streak touched his hair, Kale caught me smiling at it. You find age amusing? He asked. I find it proof, I said, that we survived everything they swore would destroy us. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in violet, Kale stood beside me on the balcony. Do you ever miss Holofan? Always, I admitted. But I carry it with me. It's patience. It's mud. It's truth. He nodded. Then maybe it was never exile. Just preparation. Below us, the city lights shimmered like a reflection of the stars. Highfell was no longer a fortress. It was a living, breathing heart. And for the first time in generations, it beat in harmony. Kale reached for my hand. We endured the night, he said softly, and woke to a dawn neither of us imagined. I replied. The moon rose, casting its silver blessing across the kingdom we had remade, Alpha and Omega, king and queen, equals at last. And somewhere in the quiet between our heartbeats, I swore I could hear my grandmother's voice. Your heart is the one thing they cannot take unless you surrender it. I never surrendered mine. I shared it. And in that sharing, I found forever. The years rolled like gentle tides, each one softer than the last. Highfell no longer echoed with fear, it hummed with laughter, with wolves singing beneath the moon not out of hunger, but gratitude. Kale's hair had turned silver, mine threaded with white like frost in moonlight. We walked the ramparts one final evening, The kingdom spread below us, fields, forests, rivers, all stitched together by peace we'd fought to teach, not to win. Do you ever wonder, he asked quietly, if the night we met was fate or chance? I smiled. Maybe both. Maybe the moon needed someone stubborn enough to listen, and the king needed someone brave enough to tell him the truth. He chuckled softly, the sound still carrying warmth even after so many winters. Then I'm glad you endured that night, little Omega. And I'm glad you kept your word, Alpha King. The wind moved between us, carrying the scent of pine and hearth smoke. Below, children chased fireflies, their laughter rising like a blessing. Kale looked out across his realm. We built something worth leaving behind. Yes, I whispered. But we're not leaving. We'll always be here, in the balance. And when the moon climbed above the towers, its silver light touched our joined hands, sealing not a bargain, but a legacy. The Alpha King and his Omega Queen, once bound by fear, now remembered for mercy. And though the night had long ended, its lesson remained. Endure, choose, and love, until even kings learn to listen.